When I was a kid, this was an unusual view. Not because I didn't play and ride in these hills all the time. It was because most days the smog was so bad we couldn't see these hills. They're only about 2 miles from where I'm standing, but the air would be so thick with smog you wouldn't even know there were mountains there. Some days we would get home from playing outside and we couldn't even breathe. We thought it was just from playing hard, but now that I'm older, I know it was because the air was poisonous. Young people, ask your parents that grew up in Southern California what it was like. Some days we would literally see clouds of yellow smoke rolling towards us. The air used to be so bad, it could make people sick. They would give us warnings on the news telling us to stay inside. The air is harmful to breathe today. But even with those warnings, it was regularly so bad, kids were getting asthma. But it wasn't only making kids sick, making the earth sick. The pollution would cause acid rain. That is, the chemicals in the pollution would combine with the water vapor. And when it rained, that rain would be acid. The rain that was meant to make things grow, to bring out life from the earth, instead was killing stuff. It was killing plants and animals. And it wasn't just harmful to plants and animals, it destroyed buildings too. Isn't that awful? I mean, we made things so dirty that the air and water were actually poisonous to us. Not just us, but to plants and animals, even to things as seemingly indestructible as the stuff we built. It was being eaten up by our pollution. But things have gotten better. Like I said, when I was little, we usually couldn't see those mountains just a few miles from us. And the buildings of downtown LA, it wasn't until I was much older that I saw how close they were. In fact, these days, you can usually see the buildings of downtown LA. Our air has gotten much better. But that didn't just happen. That is, it didn't get clean all by itself. People had to work really hard to change minds and laws. And they were up against a lot of opposition. It wasn't that people didn't know what pollution was doing. Rather, there were some people, a few powerful people, that said it might not be worth doing anything about it. They thought they would miss out on making a lot of money if things changed too much. And so, like with the tobacco companies you might be familiar with, first, they'd try to tell people there was no proof that all the pollution was making acid rain or giving people asthma. Then, when that didn't work, they'd try to say changing things was too expensive and no one would have jobs anymore if we did. And of course, they wanted to influence people for whom changing things was just too different a way of thinking. I mean, some people grew up just burning trash in their backyard, using gasoline to clean everything. It seemed normal and good. That's just how you did things. So even if these practices caused problems, even if these practices were making people very sick, things had always been that way. So it was difficult to imagine things could be different. That is, those things became normal. And it's very easy for us to confuse normal with good. When we confuse normal with good, that's very often where we get into a lot of trouble. Growing up in a church, I was told there were a lot of things that made God angry. Even though it made God sound a little petty or arbitrary, I was told everything from the music I listened to the people that would be my friends could be something that would make God very angry, and if God was angry, bad things might happen. But one thing I never heard, one thing I was never told that made God angry, was poisoning the planet. And I don't know. If I gave someone the gift of a universe that has this cool planet in it that could bring forth life and sustain it, and then I made people to take care of it all, including taking care of each other, and I gave them everything they needed to do that. If instead they decided to poison the planet and hurt each other, I'd be really mad. But of all the things I was told might make God mad, destroying creation and destroying each other really never seemed to come up. In fact, I came to find that people who most wanted to impress with how seriously they took the Bible by reading the story of Noah and the ark very, very literally, they were the least likely to believe that human wickedness could lead to something like environmental catastrophe or natural disasters. I think it may be a little bit different now. I am aware of more pastors and Christians who understand taking care of creation as a way of loving their neighbor and themselves. But growing up, that was not a lesson that I'd ever heard.
In fact, I heard pastors say just the opposite. I remember one pastor telling a friend of mine that she was silly for caring what would happen to the planet, that it was wrong for her to care about pollution. In fact, another pastor said pollution was good because if we destroyed the planet, that meant Jesus would be coming back.
When he said that, I don't think he was considering how awful things would have to be for the whole world to be so polluted that all life would end. I'm sure he envisioned something much more sanitary. And as I got older and I learned more about the Bible and I listened more carefully to Jesus, I could tell these pastors were probably mistaken. And I learned how easy it is to make a mistake like that. Jesus, as well as other voices in the Bible, tell us plainly time and again that there are forces, idols, things out there that are competing for our loyalty, trying to trip us up. And when they do, we can make some pretty bad mistakes.
It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make mistakes. In fact, once we know what's going on in the world and the kind of things that influence us, it would be really foolish, if not blasphemous, to think we wouldn't be wrong. But we know that Jesus also says he'll be with us, that he'll be encouraging us, showing us what there is to do to be able to love each other.
Looking at this now, especially knowing that there's even more that can still be done to clean our air and water, it's hard to believe that the people in charge who knew the air was poisonous, who knew the damage we were doing, that they said it not only couldn't be cleaned up, but it shouldn't be. They said it wasn't worth it. And even more amazing is that that idea could become so pervasive that we would even find it among people of the church, people who are supposed to believe that all of creation is a gift of love.
This isn't meant to make you think that this or that individual, one particular person is the problem. As Christians, we know that our struggle isn't with flesh and blood against any one person. It's a spiritual problem. But saying it's a spiritual problem doesn't mean that it doesn't have physical consequences, that it's not known in the actual world that we live in.
If you've ever seen or known someone struggling with addiction, you know their struggle is choosing a chemical over loved ones, or they seem to choose a chemical over loved ones. They seem to choose it even over themselves. I think that gives us an idea of what it means to be in a struggle with the rulers and authorities, the powers of this world that's mentioned in Ephesians. We know struggling with an addiction is not simply about making bad choices. It's not about a person's mistakes or failures. It's not even about the chemicals themselves. There's a whole lot more at work. It takes hold of them. And we have to see that's the case for all of us. We are all deeply influenced by these rulers, powers, and authorities. There's a really bad idea out there. It says we're only free if we are free to sin. We're only free if we're free to make bad choices. So some might say that the freest human is the one that can choose anything, right or wrong. And it's a classic myth. And I think that explains a little bit about our obsession with wealth. More wealth equals more power to do anything. And so the freest person is the one who can do whatever they want.
I don't think that's a very faithful notion of freedom. In fact, I think it's opposed to what Jesus taught us, even though I'm sure you'll find Christians today who think of freedom in those terms. I think all of us think about freedom in those terms sometimes, but I think that's what Jesus is getting at in this week's passage.
He's telling his followers that commitment will be difficult. Maybe sometimes loving others seems easy, but we have to remember, maybe it's easy for you. Maybe that particular thing you do to show someone you love them is just easy for you. It happens to be something you're really good at. Or maybe other circumstances make it easy to show love in a given situation. Those things might be true, but we have to recognize And listen to Jesus. He warns that it will be difficult. Loving others will be divisive. Jesus says following his example, doing the things that are good for others, they can even turn people against you. It will be difficult to do the loving thing because there are so many forces in the world set against love. I mean, we were so taken up by the powers of this world, we didn't want to clean the air. We didn't want to clean the water. It was literally killing us. Now, how could we think that systemic racism, exploitive economics, all these injustices that hurt us and destroy the future, that they're just going to go away because we don't like them? How could we think that there won't be conflict? Jesus tells us plainly it's going to be rough. And it's going to be rough with ourselves. I mean, it's not only going to be rough between us and others, but in ourselves we will find this conflict. When things are really close to home, it's going to be even more difficult.
A young person I know told his mom that he misses every place. And I hear you, dude. I miss every place too.
I miss a coffee place. I miss a food place. I miss just easily going in and out of Trader Joe's and sometimes running into friends. And it's not just places I miss. I'm a terrible singer and I miss singing with other people. I miss our in-person VBS. I miss putting on a musical. And oh man, I already miss Halloween. So when there are these voices, sometimes very aggressive, strong voices saying, get back to the way things were, get back to normal, there's a strong temptation to go the easy way, to ignore the harm that might be done to other people.
And you know, it's not good that there's a pandemic, so we shouldn't tell ourselves that those things don't matter or that we're wrong to miss them. But even more so, we need to not give in to the temptation to harm each other because we miss those things.
We're supposed to be together. We're supposed to socialize. We're supposed to join and be physically present with each other. We see this in the Gospels, that those are the kinds of things that Jesus set aside or pointed out as sacred. These things are holy, they are good, they're fundamental to who we are as God's creatures. Feeding and eating with each other are sacred things. Being physically present with each other is a sacred thing. And especially because of that, we have to make sure we are doing those things without causing each other harm. Obviously, we need to be moving towards those things, towards being physically present with each other, towards doing those things that we're used to as the church. But we need to be moving towards them in light of the foundational command of loving each other the way we are loved by God, with a life-giving, generous love. And I know that's made much more difficult when there are worldly voices, very prominent voices telling us not to think of others, telling us that our freedom means we won't be told what to do. But that is the challenge before us.
But it's not a burden. It's difficult. It's hard work, just like Jesus said it would be. But we get to think about reimagining what the church looks like in these circumstances. We get to really lean into those things that are sacred, those things that are holy, that we get to do with whatever size community we're a part of right now.
You know, it's so easy to be influenced or taken in by something or someone other than Jesus. At the intro, I talked about how those forces tried to convince us it might be worth it to poison creation. And I hope we know that this isn't just about pollution. It's about the challenges we face that we have to address head on when it comes to what it means for us to follow Jesus right now. Not simply when facing questions of reopening a church building, but when it comes to questions of other people's well-being and their lives in light of health, justice, and a safe home for everyone.
If we call ourselves Christians, if we say we're followers of Jesus, all that means is that we know how much God loves the world, how much every single person is cherished by God. And that means everything we do, from wearing a mask in public to working harder to make sure our social systems actually do work for justice and the dignity of every person. All of those things are things that we get to work for. That from the things closest to home to the most globally minded things reflect what we understand about ourselves and other people. That God is with us and for us. Amen.